When you played for the Bulls, you're almost like a celebrity. Now you come back and you're no one. You're nothing. No one can prepare you for that day. You walk out off the pitch and you don't have a job.
Didn't make any financial sense, and it certainly didn't make any sense on paper to walk away from a top job. I found the story around Oscar Pistorius really difficult to cover because I had known Oscar, he was a friend.
I got this little one at home who looks at me with these big eyes and says, and you just want to give her the whole world. Obviously what we achieved in rugby was good and was nice, but if you think about it, it's actually a very small part of your life. The next part is a lot longer.
For a year almost, Pretoria was the centre of sort of global journalism. And Madiba was sick at the same time. And I had sort of this ringside seat to both stories.
Wynand from 10 years ago would be proud, but even more so, I hope Wynand from 10 years from now will be even prouder in the future.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Winning the Away Game. Today we have a special episode for you. I've been looking forward to this for a few weeks. It's just amazing, these interactions we have with South African Springbok players, starting over in a career after being professional players, and South African expats in every part of the world trying to win the away game. So very excited about today and looking forward to chatting and have another great conversation. Flip, how are you today?
Justinus, I'm great. Thanks very much. Another beautiful non-sunshiny day in the southwest of France. Yeah, we've got some exceptional guests today. Outside of in his previous career, he could contest our other guest for the beautiful white hair locks that he had. But Springbok and Bulls legend went across the roads to play for Montpellier and Worcester, a stalwart in every sense of the word. Wynand Olivier, how is it? Good to have you here.
Like a Flippy, thank you very much for having me. I actually thought this was yesterday, so my timing's a little bit out because with the kids at home, work and December holidays around the corner, time's a little bit screwed up currently. Yeah, but thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
And with him, we have one of the essential voices of South Africa. Robyn has told South Africa's story to the world for multiple decades and I've had the privilege to interview some of the most meaningful contributors to the history in South Africa. So, Robyn, really looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better and learning from you today.
How's it? Hi, nice to see you all. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we always like to start with the same question, and that is really to learn your personal favorite Springbok related story. So whatever you feel will tell from your point of view the most authentic story related to the Springboks, please feel free to share with our audience. Robyn, you want to go first?
Oh, no, man, don't do that to me. Wynand, you go first.
I have to think about Springbok stories, though. There's so many.
You've got so many.
Yeah, it's actually quite difficult. Just I have to think about it. I don't think about those stories a lot these days, except when my kids see me on TV and they ask questions. Other than that, it's like it's far in the distance. So give me a second or so. Let me just think about one or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, you think, and I'll talk, so I'll give you some air cover here, Wynand. I think the fascinating thing for me was always watching Springbok fans. I think I covered, when I was CNN's Africa correspondent, I used to really enjoy covering sport, just because I think it was such a great way of trying to throw back to a nation sort of an image, the best image of itself. And so I remember when you guys came back from winning the French World Cup. So what year was that? 2007.
2007.
Yeah. And I had a 1-year-old at home. And so I couldn't travel very far, but I had to cover that World Cup from Boktown in Monte Cassino in Joburg. And I remember being surrounded by just sometimes very drunk, or even just, very drunk South African Springbok supporters, all families. And it was just an amazing sense of watching from far away, the way the team kind of just really meant something to South Africans. And I think that's something you guys probably didn't see because you were always playing out there. But it must have been, I don't know, what does it feel like when you know that you have sort of this whole nation behind you and on your back?
Yeah, 2007 is quite an exceptional year. I think because we won the first Super Rugby against the Sharks in Durban. And on that special weekend, obviously, we played against John Smith Sharks. And we won the game on the Saturday, and straight, like maybe 10 minutes after the final, and we right back in the change room, we all got messages from Jake saying, listen, you have to be in Cape Town tomorrow morning. And we didn't even start to celebrate, and everyone was like, yes, what are we going to do? We're the first South African side to win a Super Rugby. And I think the nice thing about that is John Smith phoned Jake White, and he said, listen, he give the boys a chance to celebrate a little bit. And by the time we got back in Pretoria, Smitty phoned Victor and said to him, listen, go have a lekker day tomorrow, celebrate, we'll see you guys on Monday. And I think that was probably the start of the camaraderie we had in the team that year, especially in saying that they'd obviously just lost the Super Rugby to the Bulls, and just saying, listen boys, go have fun, we'll start preparing for the World Cup on Monday. And that was quite a special thing for the captain to stand up towards the coach and say, listen, let the boys have a little bit of fun.
That's awesome, mate.
Yeah.
It's a great story, man. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Wynand, so obviously from Welkom, and then moved on
I was actually from Riebeekstad. It's 9 k's outside of Welkom. It's a little bit more Lania.
You're on the Lani side of Welkom.
Yeah.
Well, that obviously explains the beautiful hair.
But then moved on to Pretoria to Affis, one of the great rugby schools in South Africa. Where in your career, take us through that. Where in your career did you understand that rugby is a thing that you will be able to do?
So Flippy, I was fortunate enough. Well, I've got an older brother, so since the age of maybe 2 or 3, since I can remember, and living in Welkom, we had a small park just opposite our house. So we used to play rugby in the park. So if it's rugby season, we play rugby. If it's cricket season, we play cricket. If it's tennis season, and one thing I remember is, especially when it's boxing season, at that stage, Mike Tyson was fighting and everything. So me and my uncle played for the Northern Free State, the Griffins back in the day. So we had all these rugby socks. So we'll take rugby socks, put them around our hands, and we'll put other socks in front, and then we'll box. But anyway, so in 1995, my dad was privileged enough to go to the Rugby World Cup. And I was a Springbok fanatic at that stage. Obviously, I was a Bull supporter back in the day as well. And my dad brought me back the match day program from the 1995 World Cup. And up to today, I still have it in the room upstairs. I don't know if you remember, they had those rugby cards for the players back in the day as well. So I've got all of those, all the 95, the All Blacks, the Springboks, everything. But then, like you said, end of 99, my dad, he worked for IBM at the time, so he was transferred to Sandton in Pretoria, so I went to Affis. And my mom and my dad said to me, listen, but this is not Welkom, huh? This is big school. We watch these guys playing on TV on Saturdays, and I said to my mom, yes, I'd love to play there. And just taking a step back, after the 1995 World Cup, when my dad got home and he brought me the matchday program, I said to him, Dad, I want to have my name in that program one day. And he just said, it's not that easy, but we'll see. But anyway, then we moved to Welkom, to Pretoria. And obviously, Friede Priya he was one of my matrics. I was standing at 9 at the time. And I've known them from Craven Week in primary schools. So Friede was quite, as a gentleman as he is, he took me in and said, listen, don't worry, this will be good. Just do your best and all that. And we played trials, and I don't know if you remember the late Francois Swart. He was a legend at the time. Obviously, a year after school, Rudolf Swart pulled him into the Springboks squad as well. And I played my first trial games against Francois, and I had a blind of a game. Second day, same thing. And I jumped on the phone. I said to my mom, "Listen, I think there's opportunity for me to do something here." And Pierre Edwards was our
Principal.
headmaster from Affies at the time, and he pulled me, and my first game for Affies was actually at fullback. And it actually went well the first game, the second game, and eventually after the third or fourth game, they moved me to inside centre after Frida again stepped up and he said, listen, check, Wynand's got a good pass to the right and left. Let's put him in centre next to Francois and we see how that goes. And that's where my whole centre, playing centre started and everything. And that same year, Standard 9, I played Cravenwick for the Bulls, and again, I had a blind over season. Didn't get picked for SA schools or SA Academy. But obviously coming from Welkom, growing up in a town it's quite hard. Obviously we do fighting as a hobby on weekends. So you have to learn to stand up for yourself. So I said to my mom, listen, I don't care if I play SA schools, whatever, but I'm going to give it another go. And then matric, my third game, I tore my ACL in my knee, so I was out for the season. And as it is, young boy, I've got all these aspirations to play for the Springboks and everything. And obviously just being opposite Loftus, I thought to myself, listen, we're not going to let this go. I had a cry and everything. Finished my matric year, and I got a contract from the Bulls that year, earning 1,000 rand a month. So I thought, listen, don't care about the money. You've got the contract. Now it's in your hands. And luckily, Dick Meir was a coach at Tikkies at the time. And he pulled me in after the first varsity game, and he said to me, listen, Wynand, you got something special. I'm gonna make sure you make it one day. And I think my first game for Tikkies was the Carlton final, and then the following weekend we played against the Currie Cup side. So Tikkies against the Currie Cup side, the likes of Anton Leonard, Frida, all those guys. And again, I had a blind. I scored the first 3 tries of the game, where everyone else wanted to kill me. And the following day, Heineke phoned, he said, listen, he wants me to join up in the Currie Cup side. And so from there on, I just said to my mom, listen, I'll focus. I didn't go out jolling with the guys at varsity. I'd go out till 1 or 2 in the morning just drinking orange juice or whatever. But as a young boy from Welkom, and I actually say it as a joke, but it's actually true as well. I said my biggest dream coming from Welkom was just to move out of Welkom. It wasn't to become a Springbok, just to get opportunity. And from there on, obviously, I had a lot of great opportunities and coaches that gave me opportunity, and the rest is history.
That's an awesome story. I was in Skelkrans. I don't know if it rings a bell, but Fourie and Pierre both were in primary school with me, and it's just amazing the road they walked as well. Robyn, tell us a little bit more about your origin story and growing up in South Africa and what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Joburg, and I actually was born in Australia. So I come from the original sort of soap peels, I think, really. Because my
doesn't sound like an Afrikaans though, huh?
Yeah. We were packing for Perth, all those decades before, because my grandfather actually was a Springbok cricketer. So he was an opening batsman for the Springboks in the sort of late 1920s, early 1930s. So he went over on tour to Australia in 1930 and played in the Test there against Don Bradman. And that's a whole nother story. But anyway, he had stopped in Perth and whatever and fell in love with Australia. So he came back and he basically spent the next 20, 30 years taking the Curnows between Perth and Joburg. So I have a bunch of uncles who have Australian accents, and then my dad came back. And so we went backwards and forwards, because as it is with most South Africans, when you emigrate, you spend half your time sort of wishing you were home. And when you're home, you spend half your time thinking, what's it like on the other side? So literally, I think my grandfather took the Curnows back and forth between Australia 3 or 4 times, which is why I was born in Perth. But then my family, my dad and my mom moved back to Joburg, and I grew up in Joburg. And then, of course, went to Australia after university and decided I didn't like Australia. I went back to Joburg, and now I've spent much of my life doing exactly what the Curnows have been doing for 100 years, since they sort of moved to Joburg to mine. So I'm backwards and forwards all the time. But yes, I went to St. Mary's in Joburg and pretty much grew up in a cricketing family. Well, on the side of the sports fields of every boys' school in Joburg and Pretoria, I kind of watched my brothers or my dad play cricket. So the thought of being a journalist in those days was not even it didn't even enter my head.
And so, how did you end up being a journalist?
I don't know. I mean, it was one of those things. I'm not very qualified to do anything else. It turns out that I am, I was undiagnosed dyslexic, so I wasn't very good at school. But I'm pretty much a street fighter. Maybe I should have grown up in Volcom too. But you kind of land up getting pretty sharp elbows when you struggle to read. And I changed schools a lot of times, and so I'm really good at picking up stuff. I think it turns out that dyslexic people generally have a superpower to kind of read a room and tell stories and, kind of have a broad understanding of the way things work. So I think journalism, particularly TV journalism, is very good at that because you can just talk and you can kind of read trends and you can kind of get a sense of the way things are going without having to write the minutiae of, say, a long investigative piece in a newspaper, for example. So TV journalism, I kind of fell into it in the very early 90s. I was one of the young, new reporters at the SABC. So 95, I just graduated. I went to Maritzburg Varsity and kind of drank my way through my degree. And then basically got hired at the SABC as sort of one of the new faces. There was a bunch of us, 4 or 5 of us, who were kind of the on-air new faces that were trying to take the SABC news away from sort of the old propaganda kind of reporting. And so I was 22 when I first started reporting with the SABC. So that whole Mandela presidency, sort of, I was there. And if you remember, I mean, SABC News was the only news in those days. So it was an incredible time to kind of try and cobble together and craft this sort of image of what South Africa wanted to be. And I think Madiba used us and used the storytelling to kind of throw a mirror back at the nation. And so I really took that to heart because a lot of the reports, and they still do it at the SABC, was that, say I would go out into one of the townships and interview some gogo about whatever the news was of the day. That story would be translated into all the official languages. So, so I knew when I was reporting in those early days in the 90s during the Madiba presidency that story that I was doing would be translated and then broadcast into the far reaches of KwaZulu-Natal or into the Kalahari or, into the suburbs of, Sandton or wherever, on radio and on television. So it was an extraordinary way to try and learn to tell a story that was universal to all these different divided parts of South Africa. And I really learned that journalism could be a bridge to differences because I had to find the commonality that a gogo in KwaZulu-Natal and the bridge ladies in Sandton would both be listening to the same report. And so I really, really learned at the coalface there on how to use journalism for good. And as I said, sort of flip a mirror back to a society of what it could be and what it wanted to be. And that's why I kind of get a little distressed about media these days, because I think it's often used to divide rather than to be a bridge to differences. But yeah, they were very formative years, sort of growing up in my journalism as South Africa was kind of growing up and trying to cobble itself together.
I think you're way too English for the news in the Kalahari, Robyn, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, somebody else would translate. Yeah, the reports would be translated and then you'd suddenly hear your words in Afrikaans or yes. No, I wouldn't have survived in the Kalahari maybe, hey.
Yeah.
Neither in Malcolm.
Yeah. No, exactly. Your grandfather wouldn't have had anything to do with me.
No. Unless you could speak Zulu.
Wynand,
not very well.
You were very much part of constructing the golden era at the Bulls. I mean, you touched on the 2007 Super Rugby, but it's plenty plenty of Currie Cups before that as well. There's the 2007, 2009, 2010 Super Rugbies, and 38 Springbok caps in that as well. And then 2013, you decided to pull your wickets and go overseas. Take us a little bit through that thought process. How did you get to that moment?
Yeah, obviously after the 2007 World Cup, there was a few opportunities to go abroad, but at that stage, it worked like if you play abroad, you're not allowed to play for the Springboks. So obviously stuck around for a little bit longer, and then in 2010, I got a contract from Stormers, decided against it, and then Flippy, actually in 2012, I went to Japan for the first time. So Heineke Meyer took over as coach from Springboks. And I played my last test at that stage was in P against England. So obviously sitting with this thing on my heart, I need to speak to Heineke about the opportunity I've got in Japan. So obviously the Thursday before the game, I said to him, listen, I've got this opportunity. I can't play the game on the weekend if I've got this thing on my heart. So we sat down, we had a coffee, and I explained the whole situation to him. And he said to me, listen, don't worry about it. We chatted on Sunday after the game. Just go and play the game first. Then, Flippy, the whole thing was, it was such a good offer from Japan. Never been there. I was fairly young, 29, 30 at the time. And I thought, yes, let me go and just see what it's about. So what a lot of people don't know is I ended up in Japan. So I sat there for the first week, obviously on the couch, almost crying, phoning my mom and saying, Mom, I don't know what I've done. Yes, I'm sitting in Japan. I got no idea. Everything looks the same. I don't know what to do. So then I thought to myself, well, you have to make this work. So I took a few things I had in the house, like either a shoe or can or whatever, and I started walking to the train station like I've got in Japan. So then I put every 100 meter, I put a can down or a shoe or whatever it might be, just so I don't get lost. But it ended up being one of the best experiences. Obviously, living in Tokyo, playing a different style of rugby in Japan. So I think I was about 94 kgs when I arrived in Japan. I ended up 86 or 87 when I finished. And then I think I came back the 26th of January 2013 and back into the Bulls. Obviously 6-7 kgs lighter than I normally are for playing Super Rugby and everything. And I must say, obviously, going to Japan, it opened up my eyes a little bit in terms of what's out there. Because I think, obviously, with those golden years we had the Bulls, we were a little bit living in a bubble. Obviously, knowing that it's not going to last forever. So, and I firmly believe life gives you two choices. You either decide to change with the world, or the world's going to change you. And that was one of the things that actually brought my decision to go to France. I spent from January till June, I spent with the Bulls. And then I decided, obviously, being my son and being really feared, with the French heritage and everything, I thought to myself, I always wanted to speak French. The opportunity came up, and my coach in France was Fabien Galtier. So I thought, yes, he was one of the stars of the 95 World Cup as well. So I just couldn't say no to the deal. And like everyone say, if you want to go on holiday in summer, go to the south of France. And there's a reason for that. So the 4 years I spent there was probably some of the best years of my life. Rugby was pretty decent, but obviously partied it like a rock star as well. And social media wasn't that big at that time, so we could still do it.
That's amazing, Wynand.
Yeah, well, and then in 2015, I decided I think it's time to hang up the boots. So I took a 3-month sabbatical. So me and my wife traveled quite a bit. I go to the gym in the morning, I pick her up, we go to the shop, buy 2-3 bottles of wine, sit on the balcony, or go to the beach, have some wine. And then I played 1 or 2 games for the Barbarians of the World 15 and got offered a few other contracts. And I said to her, listen, let's go to England. We've never been there. We've been to Japan, been to France. Let's go try England for you. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it is what it is. And we go back to France on Chamals. So that's how the whole going abroad thing started.
So Wynand, as a staunch Blue Bull supporter, I mean, to give you context, one of the worst days of my life was the Currie Cup final in 1990, which I was at when we lost to the Sharks. And I was at all of the finals from 2002, 3, 4, 5, and at all of the Super Rugby finals as well. There's one thing I would love to get your context, and I've never asked anybody that was in the ecosystem at the time, but one of the most tragic days for me during that golden era was Etienne Botha, and when he died in the car accident. It was, I mean, I didn't know him at all, but as a Bull supporter, it sort of shocked me completely. What was it like in the camp and for the team to go through that experience?
Yeah, well, that obviously was a very sad experience. Etienne was obviously a great guy, and he was a mentor for me as well. I had the opportunity, obviously, to learn my type of game from a guy like Etienne, who I think maybe had some of the best feet in the game at the time. And obviously JP Nell was there and Fricky, and I actually got the opportunity to start that game against Griquas on the weekend. And Brian Abana, obviously, he just came to the Bulls, so he was living with Etienne at the time. And so we all decided, listen, let's go out for the evening. It was a Wednesday night, and we went to a place in Centurion. And yeah, we had like myself, Anton, Lene, JP Nell, well, most of the boys were there, but we all knew we were playing game on Saturday, so we're not going to stay out too late. So I think myself and Brian left around 11 o'clock, and Etienne said, no, he's going to stay a little bit longer. And myself and Brian were probably some of the last guys there with Etienne. Yeah, so we left, and Brian went home, and I think at 3 or 4 in the morning, Brian phoned me. Obviously didn't pick up the first time, second, and when he phoned me the second and third time, I knew something was wrong. So I picked up the phone, and he said to me, listen, Etienne is not at home. And then literally 10 minutes after that, Heineke phoned Brian and said, listen, Etienne was just in an accident. Yeah, so obviously we were all shocked with what happened. We just saw him a few hours ago, and suddenly he's not there anymore. So we ended up not even having practice the next day. We didn't actually know how to handle the whole situation and what's going to happen with the game. We're not playing. I think they tried, and then I think Heine came up with the idea. You know what? Let's honor Etienne in the sense of let's play with two 13 jerseys. So I think it was the first and only time in Currie Cup history that 2 centers played with 13 and not a 12 and a 13. Yeah, so like I said, that was a massive shock at the time, and we didn't actually know it. And obviously, being 2021 at the time, we've never actually dealt with stuff like that. So it was a massive learning curve, and obviously to see how the boys got together and how they supported each other. I know Etienne was still going out with Elisma at the time. And now everyone supported her, and everything was actually quite special. And I think it's moments and going through things like that brings a team. You can either break you or bring you together. And I think we chose let's bring it together, and let's see if we can win a Currie Cup for Etienne.
Wow, thanks for sharing, man. Robyn, what's some of the challenges you faced in South Africa that shook you before you ended up moving abroad?
We were talking about this before we came on air, but I mean, I found, and I mean, you guys are Pretoria boys, I found the story around Oscar Pistorius and that whole thing really difficult to cover, because I had known Oscar, he was a friend, and I reported on him for many years, knew his family. So that whole episode, I think was interesting on many levels, because you sort of personally think, oh my God, what just happened? And then you're also sitting in the midst of one of the biggest stories on the planet. There was something about the way his story, the sort of golden boy flying too close to the sun, the kind of Icarus theme, the sort of, the shooting happened about 3 months after he had run in the Olympics, as in the able-bodied Olympics with, no legs, this extraordinary feat of athleticism and determination, and then for it all to kind of go so badly wrong. I mean, it just also a cocktail of kind of sensationalism. that really was picked up by every single media outlet in the world. And I mean, that whole trial, I essentially moved to Pretoria during that trial. I was living in the Sheraton in Pretoria, and Madiba was sick at the same time, and he was in a Pretoria hospital. And so I was toggling between the pavements of Pretoria for a year, reporting live on either story. And so it was this weird, it was a very weird time. And I had two very young children, and my husband was, who was my boss. He was the CNN bureau chief. I was the CNN correspondent. And so the kids were in Joburg during the week, and sometimes he would come up on the Gautrain, or my mother would bring them up, or I'd come back down to Joburg on the weekends. It was just a very weird kind of dislocating thing. But for a year almost, Pretoria was the center of sort of global journalism. And I had sort of this ringside seat to both stories, because I'd spent so much time covering Madiba and knew him and his family, that I had access to information. And then also with Oscar, had access and insight in a way that sort of the foreign correspondents maybe really didn't have. So it was a very confusing time, but also there was a lot of clarity involved in that story, in the Oscar story and in the Madiba story, because in many ways it was the beginning of the end of South Africa, of that part of South Africa's story, and sort of the illusions of that image that we'd built up post-apartheid of ourselves started kind of with the death of Madiba and this sort of golden boy falling so fast and furiously. I think it shifted sort of South Africans' perceptions of themselves, and certainly also perhaps how we were portrayed and how I portrayed the country to the rest of the world. So that was 2013. It was a pretty big year. And then literally once Oscar was in jail and Madiba had died, I got a call from CNN saying, okay, time to move on to your next assignment. And that's when they moved me over to here in Atlanta, where I am now, to anchor a show for CNN International. So it really was a sort of a momentous year for me on many levels, and I think for the country and just for that storytelling that South Africans, really hang on to, the sort of myth-making that we have about ourselves.
Yeah, funny story, talking about Oscar, I would have had breakfast with him 2 days after Valentine's Day, because I just arrived back in South Africa 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior to that. And myself, Oscar, Francois Hougaard, and Kevin Lerino were quite good friends at the time. So obviously just coming back to South Africa and then seeing that happen, I spoke to Oscar the day before the whole shooting thing. It was a bit of a shock.
Yeah, wow. I think, yeah. I mean, and again, there was just such a disconnect. I mean, you tell me, you were friends with all these people. The whole story was just crazy.
I was actually in Fernie, so I just left my previous business, and as a family, we decided we always wanted to live in a ski resort for a season. So I was in Fernie in British Columbia, and I woke up the morning, which would have been afternoon of the 14th in South Africa. And just all of friends and it was just like, what happened? It was this complete explosion of this unbelievable reality.
Yeah. All I can remember is we lost a home semi-final in 2013 against the Brumbies. That cost us a lot. So Wynand, you went Montpellier and to Worcester, played Worcester, and in 2019, just before COVID, called it a day, and decided to move back to South Africa immediately, if I'm not mistaken, and you set yourself up pretty well. Tell us why did you go back to South Africa? What
actually, Flippy, to be honest, the whole idea was not to come back to South Africa. So when I moved to England in September 2015, I actually found a friend of mine in South Africa who worked for Sanlam at the time. So I said to him, listen, this is my plan. I'm moving to England for a year. Don't know for how long I'm still going to play, but I need to start thinking about life after rugby. So he's David Botha, Flippy, you know David. So he set me up with a gentleman in London. Peter Fourie was managing funds at the time and everything. And through Peter, I met another gentleman, Andrew Lewis. So Andrew was doing mergers and acquisitions for Sanlam at the time. So me and Andrew hit it off quite straight away, became good friends over the years and everything. So on my off days and whenever I had the opportunity, I'd do a little bit of work with Andrew in London, meeting clients, setting up deals, just getting to know how business works. But with the first introduction, just when I met Andrew, we said, let's start with the way of elimination. Let's spend time with stockbrokers, spend time with advisors, spend time with analysts. So I literally sat with stockbrokers for 2 minutes. I said, listen, not for me, and so we started. But then in February 2019, when I thought, listen, this is done now, I actually got a job opportunity through Sanlam. I met the CEO of Lloyd's of London at the time, and the rugby club Worcester, where I was at the time, they offered me a job to come look after weekends and everything. I said to my missus, well, we got the opportunity to go back or stay here. And she says, listen, we've been abroad for so long now, so let's stay another few years in the UK. Yeah, so February 2019, me and my wife, we sold our house in Pretoria, the cars, everything, because we're moving to London. We're going to buy a place there. And then the first week of April, we flew back to South Africa to christen my daughter. I only stayed for a week. She stayed for the month till the end of April. And my last game for Worcester was on the 18th of May. And when she arrived back in the UK, she said to me, listen, family, kids, yes. Yeah, no, she wants to move back to South Africa. I was like, yes, the timing couldn't have been better. But anyway, so we decided to move back. I took another 6 months sabbatical to sort life out. But then, as Flippy know, you move back to South Africa, you don't have a job. All your friends phone you for lunches and dinners and all those things. And it becomes quite a late evening and all that. And 2 months into that, I said to my wife, listen, can't do this. So picked up, I started studying again, did a few financial courses and all that. Yeah, and then I got the opportunity in November to join a motor group here. And I started the 2nd of December, and 3 months later was COVID. Just started a new business, but then COVID was actually pretty good for me because I took the database of the dealerships and I started a insurance brokerage. So I started another company in terms of that. And from there on, Flippy, non-stop studying, working, grafting. So it wasn't all smooth sailing. There's a lot of ups and downs. And I think what no one tells you is I did work experience in London for 4 years. Helped a little bit, but no one can prepare you for that day. You walk out off the pitch and you don't have a job. First day, it sounds lekker. Yes, I'm on holiday. And then after 2-3 months, you're like, whoa, I need to start looking for a job or do something different because I got this little one at home who looks at me with these big eyes and says, and you just want to give her the whole world and whatever you can provide for her and all that. And then I took something upon myself and I decided I'll wake up every morning at 4 o'clock. I run to the gym, 2-3 Ks, gym for an hour, come back. Then I know for a fact my friends, so I can't go for lunches with my friends and everything and drink beer and all that. And I have to work. And then from there on, obviously after 2 years of starting a real job, things changed a little bit, and I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing now. It's actually quite nice, and being back in SA with family and friends.
Yeah, that transition is definitely hard, and I think part of the parallel we like to draw on the show is what it's like starting over after a rugby career with what it's like starting over in a new country. So just on that, and I think I told Flippy this the other day when I spoke to him on the phone. Out of all the countries I moved to, Japan, France, England, coming back to South Africa was probably the most difficult part to adapt back in South Africa. Why?
It's like one of those things. Everything moves on and changes, but nothing changes actually. So you just, obviously when I left here, I was single, no kids, nothing, rugby play. You come back, completely different profile. I've got a family, I've got kids. You're not in the public eye as well, not at all. Just maybe a little bit here and there. So it's more, I think it's more my life changed, and obviously a little bit in South Africa, but not too much. But it's just adapting to what, obviously when you played for the Bulls, you're almost like a celebrity. Now you come back and you're no one, you're nothing. And you have to start from scratch.
I completely underestimated starting from scratch, because when I landed here and I realized things I wanted to do before that I could just phone a friend and get done, I didn't have anybody to phone. What was it like for you landing in Atlanta, Robyn?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here 11 years now, and I still feel like I've landed on another planet. And I think the longer I stay, the more dislocated I feel sometimes. I think when you first arrive here, you're sort of in survival mode. So the adrenaline kicks in and you're having to kind of, particularly when the kids are younger. But I agree with you. I mean, those first few years, it's just the silly things like trying to find doctors, or, which school, the school system is so different. And then now, over 10 years later, we've got all of that. We've got the optometrist and the doctor, and the kids are now coming through one of them's graduated, one of them's going to graduate in the next 2 years. Now I'm kind of looking at this place and sort of thinking, who are these people? Because there's something so strange sometimes. Maybe it's you get older or the longer you're at a place, but you really realize how South African we are. I don't know if it's just us. I don't know if the French feel it when they move to America, or when the British feel it when they move to America. But I sometimes sort of feel like, as South Africans, we're so uniquely bloody South African that it becomes almost like having a third arm. You're like, nobody's ever going to understand us, because there's such a depth to our experience that everybody else sometimes feels a little bit like they're scratching the surface. Life is very simple for Americans. Particularly around where I live, we live in a place called Buckhead, which is kind of the Lani part of Welkom. And, people don't leave, their generations, the people that I live with are sort of fourth, fifth generation Americans from Buckhead. They go to the same schools. They all know each other, the same country clubs. And there's sort of a certainty and a consistency and a stability to life here, that I kind of still look at them and think, oh, wow, that must be nice. I think I'm still sort of scratching and fighting and trying to figure things out. But maybe that's just the natural state of being a South African abroad. I don't know.
I feel exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. I feel it blows my mind to think of like 3-4 generations living in the same town. It's almost like Wynand said earlier, like his goal was to get out of Welkom. I feel like, how does this work for them? Do they not feel the urge to go see the wider world?
No, and I admire that. I think and I think whether you're an English-speaking South African or I don't, there's always that sense of, we're pioneer stock. My grandparents came over from England after the war on my mother's side of the family, and on my father's side of the family, we came to Joburg from England to mine in the Witwatersrand. They were mine managers. So, and since then, I said, we've been in, Australia, and then I lived in Australia. I've got a brother in Canada. I lived in England for many years. I don't know. There's something about at least our family, but I think instinctively within a lot of South Africans is that we're wanderers. We're adventurers. And I think that sort of that fire to keep moving is perhaps what creates good rugby, and also creates that sort of sense of depth that we have as a nation.
Mm.
Never quite content.
We're never quite content. That is a very French thing, actually, to say that, jamais content. They always try and find something better out of life. Okay. I feel that it's quite a South African thing, and obviously we have the bias because we are South Africans staying here, but and Robyn, you mentioned it earlier as well, is we become more South African once we move away. And I think it's the way we grew up, the Adidas and the turtle doves, as you say, and that's how we normally wake up, and we just used to the multiculturalism, and a quiet little place is not South African. And I think that's what we hunger for while we're away.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because, and I often think about this, is that, and I've been back to South Africa 3 times this year, just for various reasons. But, we're very good at moving between classes and demographics. We have a kind of a very easy social mobility because that's the way you live in, Joburg. You're dealing with everybody in one day. And so you have a real understanding of other people and from other walks of life. And I think when you're in sort of these very homogenous suburbs, whether you're in Australia or here in Atlanta or even, England perhaps is a bit more multicultural, but, you're always looking for someone who's a little bit different because there's always, there's always going to be a good conversation to be had. And I think that's just baked into us. We're very good at trying to have a conversation with somebody who might offer an alternative version of the day.
That's a fascinating point because I was actually speaking to a very successful South African in the UK that does sort of fund management. And his take was a lot of his clients are wealthy families in Italy or in France or over Europe. And his take was that if you're a wealthy family in Italy, you can spend most of your life and your kids grow up not really confronted by the inequality in society and the poverty. Where in South Africa, even the wealthiest families, when you fly into Cape Town or Joburg, you see the reality of the world right in front of you. It's impossible to avoid it. And his take was it just makes us grow up differently and we have a different sense of the world as a result of that.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's, and I really do think that's part of our superpower. And I think that ability to be able to praat with anyone, and the sort of humor that often comes with it. And, whether you stop at a robot and somebody's trying to sell you something, or whether it's a conversation you have with people who work with you or work for you, you're always kind of very highly aware of other people's problems. And with that also other people's successes. And so there's this sort of overlapping, that you get in South Africa that you don't have in a place like America. Structurally, America, it's a very, you can go from your house to the shops, to your house, to the shops, to school, to church, and you're driving, and you never really encounter anybody who is not only foreign or different, but anyone outside your own social circle. That's what I find quite interesting is that the little pods of existence here in Atlanta, church is a huge thing. People are very religious here. And it's church and even the shops, like even if you go to Pick and Pay in South Africa, it's kind of a chaos. Everyone's there and somebody's buying walkie-talkie chicken legs and somebody else is buying fillet steak. The shops kind of cater to everybody. Whereas here, it's sort of these little pockets of people who look like you and think like you, and often they don't overlap.
That's the beauty of our country as well, isn't it? And Wynand, you touched on it. You said you didn't really want to come back, and when you came back, it's not exactly 100% what you expected. So you sort of have to reinvent yourself, as you do. How do you feel your experience that you built up during rugby and the challenges you faced? Constructed the mindset to attack this reinvention or innovation of yourself?
Yeah, I think Robyn touched on it briefly now. So I think the one thing rugby teaches you quite a lot is how to talk to different people in different ways. If it's a janitor or CEO or whatever it might be, it teaches us to have that confidence to talk to anyone, and it comes down to the adaptability. And I think like Robyn said, if you take South Africans in general, I think we adapt to the world a lot easier than other people. And I think playing rugby for so long in different countries, we've been in difficult situations on the rugby field, on and off, and I think it gives you the opportunity to reassess things a little bit quicker, maybe, and to adapt to different situations. And I think as South Africans as well, we don't like to fail. We like to win. So, I'm a very target driven person. I write my goals down every year. Every year I sit and why didn't I achieve this? And I analyze it. And I think that's the other thing I learned from rugby is in rugby, I had a goal every week, for every weekend. And that didn't change for me at all. So I still have it today. Every year when I walk in the beginning of the year, I walk into the office, I got a number in my head. That's my target for the year, and I write it on a board. If it's achievable or not, then we analyze and see why did we achieve it or why not. But it's again to that ability that rugby gave you we've got friends all over the world from different cultures, Australia, France, wherever it is. We've got friends everywhere, and it taught us that ability to talk to anyone and everyone, in a different way, according to what their culture is. And I think the one thing that me and my wife embraced quite a lot was embracing the different cultures where we lived. In Japan, we loved it. I spent a lot of time with the Japanese, putting effort into talking Japanese, and again in France as well. We put a lot of effort, and I remember when I arrived there. So Fulgence Drago was the captain of Montpellier at the time. He invited me, and I sat around a table with 10 different Frenchies, didn't understand a word of French. And he said to me, listen, just sit, just listen. So, and then every now and then he says to me, okay, we're talking about rugby, or we're talking about this and that. And it went on like that for 2-3 months, before I could literally understand anything. I could pick up words, but not sentences. And it's just being open to, and I was the only foreigner at Montpellier at the time that was invited to the Frenchies' lunches and dinners. Just because, like, I think I put myself out there, and I put a lot of effort in with them, and embracing their culture and how they do things and all that. So I think that's one thing rugby taught me quite a lot.
That's awesome. That leaning into the change and the reality you find yourself in is such an amazing characteristic, and it just drives success so much. What did you need to lean in there in Atlanta when you got there, Robyn? What was the challenge for you?
I think it's still a work in progress, and it's something that I think, we're very good at talking, as you said, to janitors or to CEOs, but I think South Africans are also very good, hopefully, at not jumping to conclusions. And so you kind of got to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And I think with such a, muddied history as ours, we've learned to kind of see the nuanced way of the world that black and white, right and wrong is hard in a place like South Africa, because it's such a complicated, complex history, and we're such a complicated, nuanced, multifaceted society. So I really found it. We moved here at the back end of the Obama presidency, so in 2014, and I then immediately, and then that whole sort of lead up to the 2016 election, I was covering it for CNN. I had it at the show. And then when Trump became president, and then, the whole Trump presidency, and then Biden, and then again. So I've been here in the last 10 years during kind of some very tumultuous shifts in the political landscape of America. And I think initially, you see it in a very sort of binary way. And I've really tried to make an effort with my girls and with me to really understand the reasons behind why people have voted one way or the other. You can't see this in a binary way, and you can't write off half of Americans as either stupid or uninformed or overly, either way. And so I've really tried to understand kind of the divisions here and where they come from, and do it with kind of kindness and empathy. Otherwise, you're fighting a fight that you don't want to, and you're not going to make any friends either if you're sort of trying to write people off politically. I don't think that's helpful, particularly when you're living in the deep south where I am.
Just great barbecue over there. That's all I can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Don't talk about politics. But no, and I think the barbecue is a good way to, there's always commonalities. When we moved here, one of the first things I did, was we went to Dollywood. So Dolly Parton has this it's like a Disney World, but in Eastern Tennessee. And so she set up, it's basically a theme park. And there's this whole Dolly Parton world. And Eastern Tennessee is a very poor kind of Trump part of America. And we went there, and I just really wanted to understand the kind of instincts of this part of the world, and I really got it. And so and of course only Dolly Parton can kind of bridge divides, but it was fabulous. And I think making sure that you understand and have empathy with people who are struggling is really, really important for kids in a entitled world in the suburbs in America. So I've really tried to push that here.
Wynand, the young boy from Rugby Kasteel, not Rugby Kasteel,
Rybekstad.
Will he be proud of the Wynand that has become after rugby?
I think he will be. It's like, I think Matthew McConaughey had a speech in one of his Oscars or whatever, where he said his hero is himself 10 years from now. Because you'll never be able to catch him. And I actually took a lot out of that speech from him. Never thought about it in that sense. And, obviously what we achieved in rugby was good and was nice. But if you think about it, it's actually a very small part of your life. If you think I played for 17, 18 years professional rugby. So the next part is a lot longer, and obviously it changes constantly because of two small kids, and life moves actually at a quite a fast pace currently. But to answer the question, Flippy, I think most definitely. And some of the most difficult changes, and a lot of people say one of the most difficult things you can do is moving from one house to another, and obviously moving countries even more so. You don't think of it at the time, but I think, like Robyn also said earlier, it's you live there for so long, and you part, but obviously South Africa will always be in your blood. That doesn't change. And as like I said to a lot of people, I live in South Africa now. It's not to say I'm going to live here forever, because we've learned how to live in the moment and how to handle change. And it's not always that easy in anything, but no one knows what the future holds. And I think Wynand from 10 years ago would be proud, but even more so, I hope Wynand from 10 years from now will be even prouder back way in the future.
That's an awesome way to look at it, because that full circle of always trying to live forward and reflect back is such a powerful weapon. So what is that?
I think the difficult part is we set goals for ourselves, and we think we're going to achieve it, but it's also to take the difficult parts and the disappointments on the chin, and just moving on from that and learning from it. And I think that's one thing I've learned a lot better since stop playing rugby that I did when I was playing rugby, because you're more disappointed in yourself back then, when now you're more figuring out, listen, what is the way forward?
Yeah, that's such an important lesson.
Very well put.
The ability to use the setbacks as the stepping stones for the future is amazing. What's the future for you, Robyn? What's the next 10, 20 years look like for you?
Good question. I don't make myself goals, because I kind of I think I tend to sort of muddle my way through things. I find it interesting to suddenly be the mother of children who are nearly grown up, and so you suddenly have to sort of think, oh well, it's for me now. I do think that journalism and media is something that's behind me in a way. You know, I did 30 years as a foreign correspondent and anchor, and I just feel like the media industry is not what it used to be, and I left because it was just not a happy place, and I just don't believe, particularly American media is just so yucky and so toxic. So I'm trying very much to kind of look forward to a place where I'm working on stuff that feels good and isn't so hard, where you're not dealing with sort of negativity. as you do. I think everybody reads the news these days, and you're like, oh my God, what's just happened now? This is giving me anxiety. So, I've spent since I left CNN, I've spent a lot of time sort of detoxing from the news. And I think a lot of my future, whatever it is, involves kind of very curated, either putting out stuff or just curating what I consume. And I think trying to live in the moment, read books, kind of go for a walk, all those simple things that sometimes you spend your life rushing past. I'm very kind of focused in trying to cut out the noise. Because I think that if you're not careful, it can swallow you up. And it's not healthy. So, that's one of the things that, I've tried to be very active with my girls is, trying to raise teenagers in America right now, anywhere. And also trying to just be a whole person, like cutting out all this noise and this negativity that gets thrown at us, and just focusing on friendships and building friendships, or figuring out where you want to be and what is actually important. It's about actually making your life smaller rather than bigger, I find. And that's kind of a work in progress where I'm going. And strangely, a lot of it is me going back to South Africa. I mean, I drove through the Karoo about a month ago, and I just thought to myself, this crazy, beautiful place. And, that simplicity and the roughness of the Karoo. And I mean, if in my head, I'd be living 6 months a year in a Pondoki somewhere in the Karoo. And 6 months here in America trying to sort of, figure out life. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Well, counting down the days for my youngest to finish school, and then I'm looking forward to...
You're also looking for a Pondoki in the Karoo, yeah.
Because I don't need to be based anywhere. I just want to be able to spend 3-4 months a year in South Africa, and spend the summers in North America is amazing. So I just want that mobility. I don't even need to own a place. I just want to be able to come and go, whatever way we like. So we're going to give you guys the opportunity to ask each other a question. While you think about the question you want to ask, tell us just a little bit full circle moment. Where do you think you'll be watching the 2027 World Cup, hopefully final, South Africa playing? And then just a little bit, maybe if you guys want to add, what do you see as legacy and or giving back for you in the future?
Okay, yeah, I think the nice thing would be if I can watch the World Cup final in Australia with my family. I'd love to take my son and my daughter to go and watch it. Obviously, my wife's watched a few games. Or she's been to a few. She's never actually watched it. But I'd love to take my kids. I think for me, legacy is not something you can build. I think legacy is something you leave behind when you pass away. It's what people say of you. He was a good father. He was a good friend. He was always looking after other people, or whatever it might be. He was a good listener. I think it's your legacy is what you build every day. For the heart you touch of people you don't know, the obviously the people you look after as well. And it was sad enough. I was at a funeral a few weeks ago, and it is so nice to hear the people speak nice things about a person. It's almost, I firmly believe, it should be a celebration of someone's life. We put on earth for a short period of time, and no one knows when our time is finished. So it is to enjoy life to the fullest, and experience different things. I firmly believe the world's put out there to be experienced, obviously in different ways. But I think the legacy is what you leave behind and how you touch people's hearts.
I have no idea where I'll be watching that rugby. Might be here in Atlanta. Maybe if I'm lucky, it'll be in a wine farm somewhere. I don't know. I do think that this team is extraordinary, and I'm kind of amazed at how deep the bench is, because I do think we have such a chance to actually finish it again. The grit and the resilience of those boys are really quite extraordinary. And in terms of a legacy, I don't know. I think it's a hard one. I'm a big believer in words, like I said before, words and deeds, sort of creating conversation that is meaningful rather than kind of hyper partisan kind of digging a trench and sort of digging in on your position. So, I hope the journalism that I'd done over the last 30 years is, still stands. The conversations I've had with, some of the most powerful, influential people in the world and some of the poorest, kind of stands as a testament to that. And I think we're all parents, and you just want to make sure that you've raised kids who can go out into the world, particularly these teenagers who went through COVID and social media and all this stuff. And I think, hopefully my greatest sense is creating daughters who are able to see the world, like I said, in a comprehensive way and able to cope. Because I see a lot of kids around me who aren't coping. I think it's a really powerful thing to send two women out into the world who are your own, but not your own, and say to them, you're okay, and you have the tools to survive. And I think particularly in an AI world, we're going into AI where, this sort of industrial revolution where things are changing so much. This generation certainly needs to sort of just understand the basics, which is, loving your neighbor and reading a good book and appreciating the simple things in life, because I think that's one thing AI can't do.
Very well. Yeah. So as Justina said, we have this little tradition where we allow our guests to ask each other a question. So ladies first, Robyn.
Okay. I want to know what it's like being out there on the field. I know what it's like to broadcast to 1 billion people during breaking news. And I know that sense of adrenaline that kicks in and you kind of just trust yourself. And I'm assuming that if you're out there and you're on the pitch and it's a final or whatever it is, and even if you're down, where you find that, what it feels like to be out there with 80,000 people watching you, and you've got to just go for it with the ball. I mean, describe that for me. I'd love to know.
Can I add one sentence there, Wynand? Maybe while answering it, refer back to the 2007 Super Final when you guys were down and the clock was already gone and you had to figure out how to win.
I must say, Robyn, one of my favorite parts of playing rugby was running out full over into a full stadium of 90,000 people. And I think Loftus Versfeld is probably my most favorite stadium I've ever played at, and that's including obviously Twickenham and all that. Every stadium's got something different, but I think knowing your family's watching, family, friends, all that, and you want to make yourself proud first, and then obviously the family as well. But you've got a team, you've got 14 other players next to you on the field plus the bench, and you don't want to let anyone down. You don't want to be that guy going into the change room after the game saying, "Listen, boys, sorry for this, sorry for that." But so I fed off a lot of energy from some of my teammates, which was good. But obviously the noise in the stadium, 50, 60, 70,000 people, it's special. So, obviously while you're running and let's say you break the line and you hear the crowd just go, "Wow," it's a special feeling, and feeding off that. And like Justina's asked, referring back to the 2007 Super Rugby final in Durban, when Albert van der Berg scored the try, when he put his hand over the myself and Morno Steyn was standing behind the poles while he was kicking for post, and he said to me, "Wynnie, we're going to beat these guys today." Yeah? And there was maybe 2-3 minutes left. I'm not sure how long it was.
No, the worst part. Sorry, Wynand, just say that again. What did Morno say, Wynnie?
He said, "Wynnie, we're going to beat these guys today." Yeah? So, and I thought to myself, yes, obviously, if he's got this belief, then let's go do this. And I think the last few phases, or maybe 3, 4, 5, I don't even know how long it was. It felt like ages. And obviously pulling it off when we saw Brian. I was on the far side of the field when Brian broke through there, just going nuts. But I actually experienced that when Brian scored the try, and it was probably one of the most, because we obviously 3-4 minutes prior to that, you could see people start leaving the stadium. And your heart sinks into your shoes, and you're thinking, yes, you can't lose the Super Rugby final. And I think we pulled off a little bit of a miracle there. But it's Probably one of the most special moments winning that Super Rugby, and just to believe the guys had in each other to pull that off was quite brilliant. But the crowd does
You know what,
put a little bit
Wynand?
of an effort.
What was amazing is I was with Pride Property at the time, and out of the entire management team, I was the only Bull supporter, and all of the others were Sharks. And I flew down for that game, and they were giving me such a hard time after that Albert van der Berg try that they couldn't believe it when we won. It was one of the most amazing days ever.
Robyn, so obviously having traveled the world and you've got 2 daughters, and I read something the other day where they said the only 2 people in the world that wants you to do better than themselves, your mom and dad. So if you have to go back through your career and your life and everything, if there's one thing which you can take out of it and teach your kids, what would it be?
There have been so many moments, because I think one of the reasons I became a journalist was not to be on television, but was actually to I was curious about the way the world worked, and also powerful people. So I spent a lot of my career being in places and watching really powerful people. So I've interviewed a lot of US presidents. I was there with the death of the Pope. I was there at Fidel Castro's funeral. And obviously spent a lot of time with Madiba, Tutu. And so you look at all these people and you think, what can I take from them? Sort of like an MBA in leadership. And I still think, and it probably is a cliche, particularly to South Africans, but I was with Madiba on his 90th birthday in Curnow. And I kind of asked him the same question, do you have any regrets? And I thought he would say that he regretted not spending enough time with his family. And he actually disagreed with me. And he said, no, that everything he did was good for his soul. And it was one of the last interviews he gave. And it's always sat with me, because that choice that he made for leaving his family and fighting for freedom was a choice. And there were sacrifices and compromises that he made, and he left behind this sort of broken family. But he did it because he said it was good for his soul. And so I've kind of used that as my mantra throughout my career. And everything I did, particularly as a journalist, I did because it made me feel good. It was fun. It was exciting. It was interesting. I was curious. And then suddenly at some point, when you're at the top of your career, and I suddenly thought, this isn't good for my soul anymore. And it was an extraordinary sense. And I realized that I was also not being, you raise daughters to say, well, you should have choice. You should be able to say no. You should always do what's good for your soul. And then you come back from work moaning about the news, moaning about the people you're working with, complaining about media in America. And I realized I was actually role modeling a pretty bad role model, because I was so unhappy at the top. Anchoring these shows in the depths of American kind of political division, that I was bringing it home. And so I hope that, to my girls, knowing that you do have a choice sometimes. And even if that choice means walking away, because it's good for your soul, it didn't make any financial sense. And it certainly didn't make any sense on paper to walk away from a top job like that. But I did it because it was good for my soul. And that advice came from Madiba. And I'm still trying to figure out precisely what's good for my soul. But I think it's really important in these days, and as a parent, to kind of let these kids know that they have a choice, and that sometimes that decision should be as simple as asking what is good for my soul.
It's good advice, sir.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Robyn. Thank you, Wynand. That was a wonderful learning and getting to know you guys. We really appreciate it. These stories of starting over and adjusting to the new context is really what the Winning the Away game is all about. And you both set such great examples of doing that and adapting. So thank you very much. And thanks for joining us. This was a wonderful experience for me and Flip. And we look forward to recording some more episodes. Tell us what you like. Send us some questions. Send us some guests you'd like to have on the show. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and all of the other social networks. And thanks very much. And thanks to the Lekker Network for supporting us and building this podcast. Flip.
Thank you, Wynand, Robyn. This was excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
All the best.